Fear Files Translation. Greetings to the Fear Files channel. Welcome, friends. Today we'll talk about a topic that will make you think twice before heading out on a hike along the scenic trails of American national parks. This story is not about wild animals, not about natural disasters, and not about banal accidents. This is a story about a pattern, a system of disappearances so strange and inexplicable that it challenges all our notions of safety and logic. Imagine this. You're walking along a hiking trail with your family. It's a sunny day, majestic trees all around, birds singing. Your child runs a few meters ahead, disappears around a bend in the trail. You quicken your pace, turn the corner, and the child is gone. You call out, silence. You run further, no traces. Just a few seconds, and your child has vanished, as if dissolved into thin air. Does this sound like a horror movie script? Unfortunately, this is reality for hundreds of families who have experienced such a nightmare in U.S. national parks. And the most frightening thing, these are not isolated cases. This is a system. This is a pattern that repeats again and again, decade after decade. Let's start with context. The U.S. National Park System is America's pride, a jewel of wilderness preservation. Founded in 1916, it includes 63 official national parks and hundreds of other protected territories, national forests, recreation areas, historical monuments. The total area exceeds 340,000 square kilometers. This is territory the size of Germany, covered with mountains, forests, deserts, canyons, and swamps. Places of incredible beauty that are visited annually by more than 330 million people. People come here to escape urban bustle, reconnect with nature, show children the grandeur of wild America. But behind this beauty lurks something ominous, something people prefer not to talk about out loud, something that turns the idyllic picture into scenery for real horror. The story of modern investigation of this phenomenon began with one person, David Paulides. David is not a basement conspiracist, not a sensation hunter, and not a paranoid. He's a former police officer who worked more than 20 years in law enforcement, a person with investigative experience and a critical mindset. In 2011, David was talking with National Park Service employees about search and rescue operations. At some point in the conversation, he asked what seemed like a simple question. Do you keep a list of people who disappeared in parks and were never found? The answer puzzled him. No, such a list doesn't exist. How so? In a country where literally everything is tracked, from crimes to traffic accidents, there's no centralized database of people missing in national parks. This seemed so strange to David that he decided to dig deeper. What he discovered over the following years of research became the basis for the Missing 411 book series, work that shocked thousands of readers and sparked a wave of controversy. David didn't just collect stories. He identified patterns, regularities that were impossible to ignore. The exact number of people who disappeared in U.S. national parks is unknown. I repeat, unknown. In the 21st century, in the era of big data and total control, we don't know how many people have disappeared without a trace in these places. According to estimates by independent researchers, including Paulides, we're talking about thousands of cases just over the last century. Some experts cite the figure of 1,600 people. Others believe the real number could be several times higher. Why such a spread? Because the National Park Service, NPS, is not required to maintain centralized records. Each park documents cases independently, often using different systems and criteria. There's no unified standard, no common database, no transparency. When David Paulides tried to obtain information through the Freedom of Information Act, a surprise awaited him. For providing a list of missing persons just for Yosemite National Park, they requested $34,000. For information on all parks, $1.5 million. $1.5 million. For a list of names and dates. This isn't just a bureaucratic obstacle. This is a wall deliberately erected between the public and the truth. The question arises, if there's nothing to hide, why does access to information cost a fortune? The most disturbing thing about Paulides' research is not the quantity of disappearances, but their quality. We're not talking about chaotic cases, but a clear, repeating system of characteristics that can be traced in hundreds of cases across the country. Disappearances don't occur randomly throughout park territories. They concentrate in specific places, clusters where people disappear again and again. Yosemite in California, one of the most beautiful and one of the most dangerous parks. Only officially, more than 30 people have disappeared here, and that's without counting cases that were closed as found for formal reasons. Great Smoky Mountains on the Tennessee-North Carolina border, the most visited national park in the U.S., and one of the leaders in disappearances. Here both children and adults, experienced tourists, and beginners disappear. Grand Canyon, a place where disappearances take on a particularly eerie character. People literally fall into the abyss, but their bodies aren't found. Or they're found in places where they physically couldn't have ended up from a fall. The Sierra Nevada region, forests of Oregon and Washington, mountains of Colorado. Everywhere has its hot spots, its cursed places where something inexplicable happens. Who becomes a victim? One might assume that mainly inexperienced tourists disappear, people who don't know safety rules in the wild. But reality is the opposite. A significant portion of the missing are people with high levels of education and intelligence. Doctors, scientists, professors, engineers. People capable of logical thinking and making balanced decisions. Experienced tourists and climbers who have spent years in the mountains, who know the terrain like the back of their hand. They disappear just as easily as beginners. Children are a special category. They make up a disproportionately large percentage of the missing. Moreover, children aged 2 to 10 disappear. That is, those who are physically incapable of going far on their own. There's another strange pattern. Many of the missing have health problems or physical limitations. People with disabilities, elderly people, those who can't move quickly. It would seem such people should be especially careful and under supervision. But they disappear. This is perhaps the most frightening aspect. People disappear instantly, literally in seconds, while in close proximity to their companions. Typical scenario: a group is walking along a trail. A person lags behind a few meters, or conversely, goes a little ahead. The others turn around. He's gone. No screams, no sounds of struggle, nothing. Or a family sets up camp. A child is playing 20 to 30 meters from the tents, in sight of the parents. The mother turns away for a minute to get something from her backpack. Turns back, the child is gone. Distances are minimal. Visibility is good. Weather is calm. But the person disappears, as if erased from reality. In some cases, the missing were in a group, surrounded by other people. The group stops for a break. Everyone sits down, takes out water and food. A minute later, someone notices one person is missing. No one saw him leave. No one heard him get up. Search and rescue dogs are one of the most effective means of finding missing people. Trained dogs can smell a person at a distance of several kilometers, trace his route by scent that remains on the ground, grass, branches. But in cases of disappearances in national parks, dogs behave strangely. They pick up the trail, follow it for several tens or hundreds of meters, and suddenly stop. They simply sit down and refuse to continue searching. Experienced dog handlers describe this as loss of trail. But the trail isn't lost gradually as happens, for example, when a person enters water. No, the trail breaks off suddenly, at an arbitrary point, as if the person simply ceased to exist at that place. Some dogs show signs of fear or anxiety. They whine, back away, flatten their ears. They refuse to go further, even if the handler tries to force them. This is especially alarming considering that search dogs are animals with exceptionally stable psyches, specially selected and trained to work in stressful conditions. In a large number of cases, as soon as a search operation begins, the weather changes sharply. Rain, snowfall, fog suddenly start. Natural phenomena that destroy traces and complicate the search. Meteorologists confirm. In areas of some disappearances, anomalous weather changes were indeed observed that were difficult to predict using standard forecasting methods. Coincidence? Perhaps. But when this happens for the 50th, 100th time, you start asking questions. Rain washes away scents that dogs follow. Snow hides footprints. Fog limits visibility for aerial search, as if nature itself conspired to prevent finding the missing person. When the missing are found, alive or dead, the locations of discovery often defy logic. Bodies are found on mountain peaks where a person couldn't have climbed on their own, especially considering the condition of clothing and shoes. They're found in places that had already been searched several times by professional rescuers. Classic example. A search team combs the area square by square. After several days, in an already examined zone, literally a few meters from the trail, they find a body. Rescuers swear they passed here many times. The body wasn't there. Where did it come from? Was it there from the beginning and simply wasn't seen? Or did someone bring it later? They find children at distances of tens of kilometers from the disappearance site, in hard-to-reach areas. Moreover, children are physically incapable of covering such distance, especially over rough terrain, at night, in the cold. When people are found alive, which happens rarely, their condition and stories raise more questions than they give answers. Children can't explain where they were and what happened to them, or they tell strange things about a kind grandfather who gave them food and showed them the way, about a big bear that carried them, about robot people who watched them. Adults fall into a stupor, experience amnesia. They don't remember how they ended up where they were found. The last thing they remember, they were walking along the trail. Beyond that emptiness, physical condition also raises questions. Some are found without shoes, although the temperature was around 0 and the terrain was rocky. Feet are clean, without serious damage. How can one walk kilometers over rocks and not injure their feet? Clothing is sometimes neatly folded next to the body. Not scattered, but precisely folded. Who did this and why? Many disappearances occur near water bodies, rivers, lakes, swamps, or bodies are found in water, although the person disappeared on land. This may have a rational explanation. People go to water to drink, slipped, fell, drowned. But often the circumstances don't correspond to this version. A person is in a group, No one sees them go to the river. A few hours later, they're found in water a kilometer away. Moreover, the current isn't strong enough to carry a body that far. Or they're found in a small stream where the depth is ankle deep. A healthy adult who supposedly drowned in such a stream. When faced with so many oddities, one inevitably begins to seek explanations. Let's consider the main theories, from the most down-to-earth to completely fantastic. The National Park Service adheres to a simple explanation. People underestimate the danger of wilderness. They get lost, panic, go in the wrong direction. They die from hypothermia, dehydration, falls. They become victims of wild animals. Sounds reasonable, and in some cases this is indeed so. But this version doesn't explain the patterns. It doesn't explain why experienced tourists disappear more often than beginners. Why dogs lose the trail on flat ground. Why bodies appear in already searched places. NPS representatives also point to the enormous territory of the parks. They say it's not surprising that in such a huge area, it's difficult to find people. But this doesn't explain cases of disappearance in popular, well-studied areas, literally a few meters from trails. Maybe people are killed by wild animals. Grizzly bears, black bears, mountain lions, pumas do indeed inhabit national parks and theoretically could attack a person. But here are many inconsistencies. First, attacks by large predators on people are extremely rare and almost always leave obvious traces. Blood, torn clothing, signs of struggle, remains. Second, predators don't carry prey for kilometers, especially if it's an adult weighing 70 to 80 kilograms. They eat the victim on the spot or hide remains nearby. Third, in the overwhelming majority of cases, they find no signs of predator presence. No paw prints, no excrement, no fur. When bodies are found, they're usually whole, without bite or claw marks. This completely rules out the animal attack version. One of the most popular alternative theories suggests the existence in remote park areas of communities of feral people, descendants of those who once went into the forests and stayed there forever. Supporters of this theory point to historical cases of forest people, individuals who for various reasons lived in isolation in the wilderness for years or decades. Is it possible that such people or their descendants exist to this day? The theory explains some aspects. Why people are found in strange places they were carried. Why children talk about grandfathers and strange people. Why disappearances occur silently. People are kidnapped by individuals experienced in survival. But here too are many problems. Over so many years, not a single convincing proof of the existence of such communities has been found. No camps, structures, fire remains in remote areas. Modern satellites and drones can detect even small groups of people, but nothing like this has been recorded. Moreover, this theory doesn't explain the strangest aspects: loss of trail by dogs, appearance of bodies in already searched places, physical impossibility of covering certain distances. Some researchers point to extensive cave systems that exist under many national parks. Perhaps people fall into hidden entrances, get into caves, and can't get out. Indeed, many parks have karst formations, caves, underground rivers. In some regions, there are literally kilometers of unexplored underground passages. This theory could explain sudden disappearance. A person walks along a trail, the ground under them collapses, they fall into a cave. Explains why dogs lose the trail, Scent doesn't pass through the thickness of the earth. But again, problems. Ground collapses leave obvious traces. Holes disturb soil, rocks. Such places are quickly discovered by rescuers. Moreover, this theory completely doesn't explain cases when people are found on top, on mountain or cliff peaks. Maybe we're talking about serial killers or organized groups of kidnappers. After all, remote park areas are an ideal place for crimes. Few witnesses, enormous territory for hiding bodies. Sounds like a detective plot. And in history, there were indeed cases when killers chose national parks for their crimes. But how to explain the instantaneous disappearance of a person who was in a group? How can a kidnapper invisibly grab a child located 20 meters from parents and carry them away so that search dogs lose the trail? Criminals leave traces, shoe prints, clothing fibers, DNA. Modern forensics can find evidence even years later. But in the overwhelming majority of disappearance cases in parks, nothing. When rational explanations are exhausted, some researchers turn to paranormal versions. And although this sounds fantastic, disappearance patterns indeed resemble some anomalous phenomena described in folklore and modern reports. Temporal anomalies. Some suggest the existence of dead zones or temporal distortions where people can literally fall out of normal time flow. This would explain instant disappearance and appearance of bodies in already searched places. They return to our time later. Portals or dimensions. Theory about the existence of certain doors between realities. A person accidentally passes through such a portal and ends up in another place or dimension. Folklore of many cultures, including Native American tribes of North America, contains stories about places where time disappears or where people get into another world. Cryptids, creatures not recognized by official science. Bigfoot, forest giants, and other cryptids supposedly inhabit precisely those regions where disappearances occur. Can these creatures kidnap people? Some eyewitnesses claim they saw huge, hairy humanoids in forests shortly before disappearances. Abductions by non-human entities. The most radical theory suggests intervention of extraterrestrial or ultra-terrestrial intelligence. Supporters of this version point to similarities of some cases with UFO abduction reports. Time loss, amnesia, strange physical effects, discovery in impossible places. Does this sound insane? Absolutely. But when all rational explanations are exhausted, only the irrational remains. Now let's look at specific cases. Real stories of people who disappeared in national parks under circumstances that defy explanation. Dennis Martin, 1969. June 14th, 1969. Great Smoky Mountains National Park. The Martin family and their friends set up camp in a popular park area. The day was sunny, warm, ideal for family recreation. 6-year-old Dennis Martin was playing with his brother and 2 other boys. The children decided to play a prank on the adults, hide behind trees, and jump out with screams to scare them. A simple children's game that millions of children play around the world. Dennis ran to hide behind the nearest tree, distance from parents about 50 meters. Literally a few seconds passed. The children jumped out from hiding with screams. Dennis wasn't with them. The father immediately rushed to look for his son. Walked around nearby trees and bushes. No one. Called out, silence. Panic began. Within an hour, the whole camp was looking for the boy. Then rangers were called. By the end of the day, dozens of people were participating in the search. The next day, hundreds of volunteers search dogs, helicopters. The search continued for 9 days and became the largest search operation in national park history at that time. More than 1,400 people participated: rangers, military, experienced trackers, volunteers. They searched every square meter within a radius of several kilometers. Result: nothing. No traces, no clothing, no body. Dennis Martin disappeared as if he never existed. But there was one strange detail. Several people who were in the disappearance area reported that they heard a wild scream shortly after Dennis disappeared. The scream was so eerie and inhuman that people couldn't forget it. What was it? Dennis's own scream? Or the scream of something that took him? One witness, an elderly tourist, told an even more disturbing detail. She saw a hairy wild man who was carrying something on his shoulder and quickly disappearing into the forest. She didn't pay attention to it at the moment, thinking it was just a tourist with a backpack. But later, when the boy disappeared, she remembered this episode. It was impossible to verify her words. By that time, the traces had long disappeared. Dennis Martin's body was never found. Official version: the boy got lost and died from hypothermia. But how could a 6-year-old child in seconds go so far that more than 1,000 people didn't find him? Kate Koch, 2014. October 2014. Siskiyou National Forest, Oregon. Kate Koch, a 30-year-old biologist and experienced hiker, went on a solo hike. She knew this area, regularly went hiking, was in excellent physical shape. When Kate didn't return at the scheduled time, a search operation was announced. The area was actively searched. On the third day, her body was found on a hilltop in an area that had already been searched 3 times. The oddities began with the discovery site. Kate was lying in open terrain, in plain sight, in a place where she couldn't have been missed in previous searches. Searchers swore they passed precisely here, and there was no body. The condition of the body raised even more questions. Kate was dressed, shoes on her feet, backpack nearby. No signs of violence, injuries, animal bites. But she was dead. Cause of death was never established. The pathologist found no signs of hypothermia, dehydration, heart attack, stroke. Toxicology, clean. Just a healthy young woman who suddenly died without visible cause. The last entry on her phone was dated the day of disappearance. Ordinary message to a friend, nothing alarming. Then communication broke off, although there was cellular signal in this area. What happened to Kate Koch? Where did she go for 3 days? Why did her body suddenly appear in an already searched place? And what did she die from? There are no answers to these questions. Jared Adadero, 1999. October 2nd, 1999. Colorado Mountains, near Purgatory Resort. The Adadero family, father and 2 sons, 3-year-old Jared and his older brother, stopped for a break during a hike. The father was literally distracted for a minute to help the older son with his backpack. We turned around. Jared was gone. The boy disappeared in seconds, silently. A large-scale search operation began. Hundreds of people, search dogs, helicopters with thermal imagers searched the mountains. The temperature at night dropped to 0, which created danger for the child's life. The next day, Jared was found alive on a mountaintop at a distance of 19 kilometers from the disappearance site. 19 kilometers in one night. A 3-year-old child. The terrain between the camp and discovery site is not a level trail. These are steep climbs, rocks, dense forest, fallen trees. An adult experienced tourist would need many hours to cover such distance. And a 3-year-old supposedly walked this in one night. Even stranger, when Jared was found, his shoes were practically clean, only slightly soiled. How can one walk 19 kilometers through mountain terrain and stay with clean shoes? Jared couldn't explain how he ended up there. He was too small to give coherent testimony. He only remembered that it was dark and cold, and that he walked and walked. Doctors examined the boy. No serious injuries, scratches, frostbite. Mild hypothermia, which quickly passed. A child who spent the night in the mountains at a temperature around 0 practically didn't suffer. How did Jared cover such distance? Who or what helped him? Why didn't he freeze? This remains a mystery. Gerald Largent, 1999. March 1999. Sam Houston National Forest, Texas. A group of hunters set up camp. Among them was 61-year-old Gerald Largent, an experienced hunter and tracker who had spent decades in forests. In the evening, before sleep, Gerald left the tent to relieve himself. He walked literally 20 to 30 meters from camp to the nearest bushes. His friends saw the beam of his flashlight. Several minutes passed. Gerald wasn't returning. Friends called him. Silence. Went to look. In the place where the flashlight was just shining, there was no one. They began to search the area, at first calmly, thinking Gerald just went further. But he was nowhere. They started shouting, no answer. Turned on all flashlights, illuminating every bush. Nothing. By morning, rangers came. Full searches began. Search dogs picked up Gerald's trail, traced his path from tent to bushes, and there the trail broke off. Simply ended. Dogs circled in place, whined, refused to go further. Searches continued for a week. They found nothing, no body, no clothing, no his rifle, which he took with him just in case. Gerald Largent evaporated at a distance of 30 meters from friends on a calm night, in a forest well known to him. Disappearances, 2013. July 14th, 2013. Mount Rainier National Park, Washington State. Disappearances, 51, an experienced hiker, went on a solo hike on a popular route. She regularly reported to her daughter about her location through a spot satellite navigator. The last signal came from an altitude of about 2,000 meters. Then communication broke off. When Stacy didn't return on time, a search operation was announced. Teams searched the area of the last signal. Weather was good, visibility excellent. Stacy knew the route, was in good physical shape, had all necessary equipment. Searches lasted several days, without result. Then, 2 years later, in 2015, tourists accidentally stumbled upon her remains. Discovery site, away from the main route, but in an area that was actively searched in 2013. What's strange? The condition of remains didn't correspond to 2 years spent in the open air in wilderness conditions. Bones were cleaner and better preserved than they should have been. There were no signs that animals scattered them, a common thing in such cases. Stacy's clothing and equipment were never found. Only bones, neatly lying in one place, as if the body was placed there after death. The NPS response: silence and obstruction. The most alarming aspect of this entire story is the National Park Service's reaction, or more precisely, the lack of reaction. NPS doesn't recognize the existence of a problem. At the official level, it's stated that disappearances in parks are rare, and each case has a rational explanation. Statistics aren't published. A unified database isn't created. When David Paulides tried to obtain information, he encountered not just bureaucratic obstacles, but purposeful opposition. Sky-high sums for data provision, delays in responses to requests, refusals for formal reasons. Why? Official explanation: protection of missing families' privacy, large volume of work to collect data, lack of necessary resources. But many see something else in this. National parks are a huge industry. Millions of visitors annually, billions of dollars in income. Tourism in parks supports the economy of entire regions. What will happen if the general public learns the truth about the scale of disappearances, about strange patterns that have no explanation, about the fact that authorities can't guarantee safety even on popular, well-studied routes? Panic, drop in attendance, economic damage, lawsuits from families of the missing, political scandal. It's easier to stay silent. It's easier to consider each case separately, not connecting them into a system. It's easier to talk about tragic accidents and dangers of wilderness. There's another version, more sinister. Maybe NPS knows more than it says. Maybe there is data so alarming that its publication would cause not just panic, but complete rethinking of our understanding of reality. What if they know what happens to people in parks, but can't explain it? What if the explanation is so beyond normal that it simply can't be voiced? Native American warnings. An interesting fact rarely talked about. Many national park territories were sacred or forbidden places for Native American tribes. Indians avoided certain areas, considering them dangerous or inhabited by spirits. Different tribes had legends about places where time disappears, where spirits take people, where you can't go alone. European colonizers and later American authorities considered this superstition. Creating national parks, they ignored warnings from indigenous populations. But what if these superstitions are based on real experience? What if tribes for centuries observed the same disappearances that happen now, and simply called it by other words? Indians told of forest people, beings resembling humans but not being human. About child stealers who come from deep in the forest. About places where the earth is hungry and takes those who step carelessly. Modern paranormal researchers conducted interviews with Native American tribe elders. Many confirmed, yes, these places are dangerous. Yes, strange things happen there. No, we can't explain what exactly, but our ancestors knew it's better not to go there. Practical advice: how to stay safe. So does all this mean you should give up hiking in national parks? No. Millions of people annually visit parks and return home whole and unharmed. The probability of disappearing is statistically negligible. But knowledge is power, and knowledge of patterns can save lives. Here are practical recommendations based on analysis of disappearance cases. Never separate from the group. Most disappearances occur when a person is left alone, even for a short time. Go to the toilet in pairs. If you need to step away, take someone with you. Keep children in direct line of sight, not nearby, but precisely in sight. A few seconds, that's all it takes. You can use special children's leash bracelets that connect child with parent. Trust instincts. If a place seems wrong, if an inexplicable feeling of anxiety or fear arises, leave. Don't try to rationalize. Our instincts have been preserved since ancient times, not just like that. Always have means of communication. Phone, satellite navigator, signal flare. But remember, in some cases technology failed for no apparent reason. Report your route. Leave a detailed hike plan Indicate checkpoints and time when you plan to return. If something goes wrong, rescuers will know where to look. Avoid solo hiking, especially if you're not a very experienced tourist. If you still go alone, be doubly careful. Pay attention to animal behavior. If birds suddenly fell silent, if a dog refuses to go in a certain direction, if animals behave strangely, this may be a warning. Have a plan of action in case of getting lost. If you get lost, stay in place. Don't try to find the way yourself, especially at night. Build a fire, prepare to wait. Searchers will find you faster if you don't move. Study the area before hiking. Learn about the history of this place, about disappearance cases, if there were any. Information can save lives. Take a whistle. 3 short whistles. Universal distress signal. A whistle is heard much farther than voice, and it doesn't require effort. Conclusion. The mystery remains. We live in the 21st century, era of high technology, satellites that see every meter of the planet, drones, thermal imagers, DNA analysis. We sent people to the moon, are exploring Mars, deciphered the human genome. And nevertheless, in the very heart of America, in national parks that are visited annually by millions of people, something happens that we cannot explain. People disappear in seconds, leaving no traces. Bodies appear in places that were already searched. Search dogs lose trail on flat ground. Children end up kilometers from a disappearance site, in places where they physically couldn't get on their own. This is not a question of faith or skepticism. These are facts, documented cases, testimony of hundreds of witnesses, official reports of search and rescue operations. Perhaps we're too overconfident in our understanding of the world. We think we've conquered nature, that we've studied the planet, that there are no more mysteries. But national parks remind us there are things we don't understand. There are forces, mechanisms, phenomena that are beyond our current science and logic. Maybe it's in the very nature of these places. Ancient forests that are thousands of years old. Mountains that stood here long before human appearance. The earth keeps memory, and perhaps not only memory. Native Americans knew this. They treated nature with respect, almost with reverence. They understood that man is not master of these lands, but a guest. And some places require special caution, special respect. We've lost this wisdom. We come to parks with the feeling that this is our right, our property, our territory for entertainment. We forget that wilderness is precisely wilderness. It's not obliged to be safe. It's not obliged to follow our rules and expectations. Human tragedy. Behind each disappearance case stands human tragedy. Families who lost their loved ones and will never know what happened. Parents who a second ago were holding a child's hand, and in an instant he disappeared forever. Many families of the missing say the same thing. The hardest thing is the absence of answers. Not knowing what happened. Not knowing whether their loved one suffered. Not having a body for burial, a place where you can come and remember. Some families continue searches independently for years. Return to parks again and again. Walk the same routes, hoping to find at least some clue, at least something that will give an answer. Dennis Martin's father, until the end of his days, believed his son was alive somewhere there in the mountains, that he was perhaps taken by wild people and lives with them. This was his hope, his way to cope with tragedy. He died never knowing the truth. Stacey Aris's daughter fought with NPS for years, demanding more thorough investigation. She didn't believe her mother, an experienced hiker, simply got lost and died. Too many oddities. But official investigation was closed with the wording accident. These families are united not only by grief, but by anger. Anger at a system that refuses to recognize the problem, at authorities that hide information, at society that prefers not to think about the unpleasant. Some created support groups, online communities where they share stories and try to find patterns. They became folk detectives, researchers, archivists of these tragedies. Because official structures refuse to do this. Scientific approaches. In recent years, researchers have appeared who try to apply scientific approach to studying this phenomenon. Not paranormalists and not conspiracists, but serious scientists with academic degrees. A group of geographers from University of Colorado conducted analysis of disappearance sites and discovered an interesting pattern. Many of them occur near granite formations. Granite contains quartz, which has piezoelectric properties. Can this create some fields or anomalies affecting people or technology? So far, this is only a hypothesis. Another group studied geomagnetic anomalies in disappearance areas. It turned out that some of these places have unusual magnetic characteristics. Magnetic anomalies can affect compass operation, GPS navigators, even biological processes in human body. Psychologists study the phenomenon of chilling fear, irrational horror that sometimes grips people in certain places. Perhaps this is an evolutionary mechanism, warning of real danger that we don't realize at conscious level. Cryptozoologists, despite skeptical attitude from academic community, continue to collect evidence about unknown large primates in North American forests. Can these creatures, if they're real, be connected with disappearances? All these studies are at early stage. Little funding, academic community is skeptical, access to full data is limited. But work continues. What rangers say unofficially. Publicly, the National Park Service adheres to official line. But what do rangers say unofficially when cameras are off and microphones put away? David Paulides in his book cites many interviews with rangers who agreed to speak anonymously. The picture they paint differs greatly from official version. Many rangers admit, yes, there are places in parks that they consider dangerous, not because of bears or cliffs, but because of something else they can't explain. Places where they themselves feel discomfort, where atmosphere is wrong. Some tell about strange finds, tracks that don't belong to any known animal, structures of branches and stones that were clearly created by someone intelligent, but not people. Sounds in the night that don't resemble anything known. Experienced searchers talk about cases that trouble them, about how a person's trail breaks off for no reason, about how dogs refuse to go in certain directions, about how sometimes during searches there's a feeling that you're being watched. One veteran of search and rescue operations who worked 30 years told Paulides, "Over all the years, I've seen things that have no explanation. I stopped trying to explain them. I just accepted that there are aspects of these forests we don't understand, and perhaps shouldn't understand. Of course, all this is anecdotal evidence, not scientific proof. But when dozens of independent sources say similar things, it makes you think. Modern technology doesn't help. With technology development, one could expect that disappearances would stop or at least significantly decrease. Now, almost everyone has a smartphone with GPS. Many use satellite trackers, smartwatches with emergency call function. But disappearances continue, and technology doesn't always help. In several recent cases, the missing had active GPS trackers. Last signal came from a specific point, and searchers headed there. But they found no one at the location. as if the person teleported from that point. In one case that occurred in 2018, a missing tourist had a smartphone turned on with location tracking function. The data showed his movement, and this movement was physically impossible. In 2 hours, the phone moved from one point to another located 15 kilometers away across a mountain ridge. On foot, this would take a whole day of difficult climbing. By helicopter, perhaps. But there were no helicopters in the area. They find technology turned off, although the battery was fully charged. Or, conversely, turned on but not responding to calls. Cameras with last photos showing nothing unusual, forest, trail, ordinary hike. And a minute after the shot, the person disappears. Social networks and online communities have made information more accessible. Now disappearance cases quickly become known. People share theories, organize volunteer searches. But this hasn't stopped the phenomenon. Global patterns. Although Paulides' research focuses on the USA, similar patterns are observed around the world. Australia, Canada, European countries. Everywhere there are wild territories, and everywhere strange disappearances occur. In Australia, in the Blue Mountains area, over the last 50 years, more than 20 people have disappeared under similar circumstances. Sudden disappearance, loss of trail by dogs, discovery of bodies in strange places. In Canada, in the forests of British Columbia, indigenous tribes speak of Tsinokwa, forest giants who kidnap people. Modern disappearance cases in this region have the same patterns as American ones. In Russia, in the Siberian and Far Eastern taiga, hunters and geologists tell similar stories. People disappear, trails break off, they're found in impossible places. Locals call it Leshy or master of taiga, but the essence is the same. In Europe, especially in Scandinavia and the Alps, there are long-standing legends about those who take away, entities that lead people into mountains or forests. And modern disappearances continue. This is a global phenomenon, something that happens in wilderness around the world, regardless of culture, climate, type of landscape. A universal mystery that humanity cannot solve. Critics and skeptics. In fairness, it's necessary to mention criticism of Paulides' work and the entire concept of anomalous disappearances. Skeptics point to several points. Data selectivity. Paulides selects only those cases that fit his patterns, ignoring many other disappearances with obvious explanations. This is called confirmation bias, the tendency to search for and interpret information so that it confirms pre-existing beliefs. Lack of statistical analysis. Critics claim that Paulides doesn't conduct real statistical analysis. He doesn't compare the frequency of disappearances in parks with frequency in other places. Perhaps people disappear everywhere with equal frequency. It's just more noticeable in parks. Patterns may be illusory. The human brain tends to find patterns even where they don't exist. This is called apophenia. Perhaps coincidences in disappearance circumstances are precisely coincidences, not signs of something unusual. Underestimation of territory scale. Parks are huge, and search resources are limited. Even in large-scale operations, only a small part of territory is searched. It's not surprising that people aren't found or are found in unexpected places. These places simply weren't searched thoroughly enough before. Normal dog behavior. What's described as strange behavior of search dogs may have simple explanation. Trail can break off due to wind, rain, soil characteristics. A dog can get tired or distracted. This doesn't necessarily mean something anomalous. Sensationalism. Some critics accuse Paulides of sensationalism, of trying to create mystery where there is none, to sell books and films. These arguments deserve attention. Critical thinking is important, especially when it comes to unusual claims. Perhaps indeed, most of these cases have rational explanations that simply weren't found or weren't properly documented. But even skeptics admit some cases are indeed very strange, and the lack of centralized database from NPS makes it impossible to conduct real, impartial analysis. Call for transparency. Regardless of whether you believe in paranormal explanation of disappearances or not, one thing is obvious. The current situation is unacceptable. Lack of centralized accounting of missing persons in national parks is a public safety problem. Families have the right to know about risks. Researchers should have access to data for analysis. Creating a national database of missing persons in parks doesn't require huge resources. This is a question of political will and transparency. Why isn't this being done? Several congressmen tried to initiate legislation obligating NPS to maintain such records. So far unsuccessfully. Lobbying groups associated with tourism industry actively oppose this. Money more important than lives? Reputation more important than truth? It seems that for some, yes. But public pressure is growing. More and more people are learning about this problem thanks to Paulides' books, documentaries, podcasts, social media posts. It's becoming harder and harder to maintain silence. Perhaps in coming years, we'll see changes. Perhaps a full-fledged database will be created. Perhaps serious scientific research will be conducted. Perhaps we'll finally get answers. Or perhaps some mysteries are meant to remain mysteries. Final thoughts. I began this episode with a story about the pattern of disappearances in U.S. national parks. We've come a long way, from statistics to specific cases, from rational theories to paranormal hypotheses, from eyewitness testimony to skeptics' criticism. What have we learned? That people disappear. That circumstances are often strange, that authorities don't want to talk about it, that families suffer, that there are no answers. Maybe a disappointing conclusion for those who expected a clear answer. But reality is this: we don't know. We can put forward theories, we can analyze data, we can speculate. But truth remains beyond our understanding. And perhaps there's certain value in this. In our world where Google knows the answer to any question, where science explains more and more, where mysteries disappear one after another, there still remain places and phenomena that remind us of the limits of our knowledge. National parks are beautiful. They inspire, restore, connect us with something greater than everyday bustle. Millions of people find peace, joy, adventure there. But they're also dangerous. And this danger may not only be in the form of bears and cliffs. Perhaps there are other dangers we don't yet understand. This is not a call to avoid parks. This is a call to respect them. Respect wilderness. Respect warnings. Respect mystery. When you walk along a trail in deep forest, when you stand on the edge of a canyon, when you look at ancient trees that remember times before you and will stand after you, remember, you're not at home. You're a guest, and the master of this house isn't always friendly. Be careful. Be attentive. Don't move away from the group. Listen to your instincts. And if the forest suddenly became too quiet, if you felt inexplicable anxiety, if something seems wrong, leave. Don't be shy. Don't ignore. Leave. Your life is more precious than any adventure. Your return home is more important than any photograph or impression. Resources for further research. If this topic interested you, there are many resources for further study. Missing 411 book series by David Paulides. The most complete investigation of the phenomenon. Many specific cases, pattern analysis, interviews. Documentary films Missing 411, The Hunted and Missing 411, The UFO Connection, visual presentation of research with eyewitness and expert interviews. Podcasts devoted to this topic. There are dozens from serious to entertainment. Online forums and social media groups where people share stories, theories, support families of the missing. Official search and rescue operation reports, available by request, but with limitations. But remember, be critical. Verify information. Not everything you read will be accurate or truthful. In this topic, there's much speculation, disinformation, outright fabrication. Separate facts from interpretations. Documented cases from rumors. Eyewitness testimony from third-hand retellings. And most importantly, form your own opinion. Perhaps you'll conclude that all this has rational explanation. Perhaps you'll think there really is something strange here. Both are acceptable positions. The main thing, don't ignore the problem. Don't close your eyes to family suffering. Don't dismiss questions that remain unanswered. Closing. This was a Fear Files episode about the frightening pattern of disappearances in U.S. national parks. The topic is heavy, disturbing, sleep-depriving, but important. If you're planning a hike, be careful. If you know someone who's going to a park, share safety rules with them. If you've lost a loved one in such circumstances, know you're not alone. There are support communities. Thank you for being with us. Subscribe to the Fear Files channel so you don't miss new episodes about mysteries hiding in the shadows of our world. Like, share with friends, leave comments with your stories and opinions. And remember, sometimes the scariest stories are those that aren't made up. Those that happen in the real world with real people. Those for which there's no explanation. Take care of yourself. Take care of your loved ones. And think twice before stepping off the trail in a remote forest. Until we meet in the next Fear Files episode.